you all very much for attending this lecture. It's a great group, and I'm going to talk one-on-one with you, my brothers and sisters in alchemy. And you've all done a lot of alchemy work with Jeff, and so you're familiar with the basic principles, I think. And we're going to try to go just a little deeper and talk about how to do alchemy on different levels, and how to make it an effective force in our lives. This drawing is a drawing of a puffer, and that's the first thing we need to get out of the way. This drawing by Ostate is pretty famous. It shows an alchemist at his furnace with a bellows, and they were called puffers because they furiously bellowed their fires. They thought that they could transform anything by getting a hot enough fire. This is the full drawing, and this is really an unusual drawing in that it just has a horizontal axis. And when you look at chemical drawings, the first thing you want to do is draw a target. It's about the above and the below. So there's a vertical axis of reality, or painters follow, and there's a horizontal axis. And that horizontal axis is our everyday reality. Left and right, masculine and feminine. And the vertical axis is the anima mundi, or the spiritual axis between the above and the below. In this drawing, it's scary in that there is virtually no vertical axis here. It's projecting out on the horizontal plane in kind of a rude way. And it shows the mentality of a puffer. The puffer is concerned with physical and wealth, physical possessions and wealth, and he's using fire. In other words, he's going to the fastest way of doing it, which is dangerous in alchemy. I think of the puffer as kind of a corporate executive, you know. That he's got the same mentality that you see in corporations. And he's abandoned the water work, or the work with feelings, and he's working with fire, which is thoughts. So it's all about thoughts and building things with thoughts. Thoughts in alchemy are things. And the alchemists believe that thoughts pile up and get in the way, and every once in a while you have to have this fire and burn them up and get them out of the way. They thought that the salt in tears was the breakdown from the breakdown of thoughts and emotions when you cried. They thought their thoughts were actually physically manifesting as salt in tears, and they made tinctures from that. So this is a still life over here, basically abandoned work, and he's focusing just on the materialistic goals. Here you see his wife wiping the butt of a baby here, and it's pretty much abandoned, pushed into the back of his life. So family life and that kind of orientation is abandoned by the puffer. There's some thought, I saw a paper once that says that this is actually, this kind of a shadowy figure up here is actually a retort. And in that interpretation, in that paper, when we reject something, when we reject our emotions or the water work, it gives it energy, and it comes back to us through our unconscious. And this retort of water is ready to collapse on this guy, and things fall apart that way. So you actually create unconscious or subconscious entities or spirits in alchemy by putting energy into anything. You reject something, and you're giving it energy, and you're creating it. Energy becomes matter. In this drawing by Rembrandt, called The Alchemist or the Philosopher, we see a whole different orientation. Rembrandt was such a master of light, and that basically this is a portrait in light. The vertical axis is very obvious here. This is the what's called the Alchemy, the Scala Meditationis, or the stairway of transformation, the stairway of meditation. And it's a spiral staircase, and that it leads through different aspects and different views of the situation. Very significant here is that the darkness and the light are both shown here. So the meditation is in the darkness, and the meditation is in the light. So, and that's a key thing that separates alchemy from other disciplines, especially other spiritual disciplines and religion. Because The alchemists work with the darkness. It's not rejected. And that's hard to get across to modern people. Psychologists recognize it. In other words, depression and dark states, when you're down, are workable things in alchemy. They're not things to take medication for. They're opportunities, because when you're depressed, you're defaulted. You don't care about material possessions. You don't care about things that you've been putting your energy into before. So the depression is really something to take advantage of in alchemy. I realize there are serious depressions that are symptoms of physical diseases. But for the most part, and certainly in this country, depression is an opportunity we're missing. Because most of the work in the light is about getting to that state where you're free of things. You know? So they actually work with meditation and on both the light and the dark. And the horizontal plane here, we see a more balanced aspect compared to the puffer. The philosopher has turned away from his books and now is in contemplation. So this is a stage beyond books. There's a time in alchemy where you burn up the books and you tear up the books and you abandon them, because the work is now interior, totally. And there's pictures of people, alchemists, tearing up books and burning them because they've reached this stage. And on this side, horizontal axis, it's male and female, which is typical for the horizontal axis. We have here the Sora Mystica, or the mystical sister of the alchemist. And she's doing the practical work in the lab, also the essential work, and she's slightly in the darkness here because that's part, without prejudice, saying that's part of the feminine role, the passive role, is to be out of the limelight. But believe me, every alchemist had a Sora Mystica, had a female compass or assistant in the laboratory.
Is this kind of an example of Aura and Labora, where she's like doing the work and he's doing the
That's exactly what it is. It's Aura and Labora, meditation or prayer and the actual practical work. So it's on the horizontal axis, it's Aura et Labora, prayer and work. And all the alchemists had, all of them had a female counterpart who did not really publicize their participation, but we know from private notebooks and things that they always had a Sora Mystica. Even Isaac Newton had a Sora Mystica, and it's a big scandal, but every alchemist has to have one. Whether it's inside him, perhaps it's an aspect of his personality, the feminine side that he's working with, or it's a real person. But that feminine has to be there to do the work. And we'll talk about this drawing more. Again, we mentioned yesterday that I went to Vienna to study with Kurt Gödel, and he was a fascinating man. He'd opened a school at the University of Vienna, and I'd gone there to study in that school. What he did is remarkable, and it hasn't filtered down into the general knowledge yet. It hasn't filtered down into the world. There's a few books about it, but this man really changed our view of what is real. And he did it mathematically with three theorems. His basic statement was that any axiomatic logical system, such as arithmetic, cannot be both consistent and complete, because there will always be statements that are true but not provable with any formal theory. Okay, that's the end of the math for today. What it's saying is that no matter what we do to try and understand reality, there's always going to be something true but not provable. And that our whole system of arithmetic, logic, computer programming, anything that is an axiomatic system based on axioms will fail because it's incomplete and inconsistent within itself. He proved that by using statements like this statement is false. This statement is false. That's a tautology in mathematics, and it'll fry any computer. It's the kind of question that Captain Kirk used to ask to the computer to burn up. Because it just goes round and round in circles. This statement is false. If it's false, then it's true. But if it's true, then it's false. And you get into that endless cycle of, and that's a tautology. It goes nowhere in mathematics. He used a lot of those examples, but he also did something really creative in mathematics. He invented a kind of meta-mathematics, a metaphysical mathematics that looked at all the propositions and different aspects of logic and mathematics and assigned it its own number or its own special symbol. And working with those, he was able to prove that there is something, always something outside. Let me give an example. Like, draw a circle around anything. Draw a circle around this chair. To understand that chair completely, you always have to leave the circle of that chair to understand it. You know, who built the chair? Where did it come from? What materials is it made of? Where did that cushion come from? That depression in the cushion come from? You have to go outside that circle to explain it, to understand it fully. Now draw a circle around the whole universe. The same thing is true. It holds on every level. You cannot understand the universe without going outside the universe. That proves in a very simple way that there exists a mind, or what we might call God, but what Gödel actually called the one mind. He said there is one mind in the universe that is the source of our creation, the source of our universe, and that we can never understand it. That's the other thing. Logically, we can never approach God. We can never understand God. And Gödel did this formula. He did it in such a way. Well, it's a good story. There was a mathematical conference in Göttingen, Germany, where all the mathematicians from around the world were coming together for one grand exposition stating that mathematics was a supreme science and that we would understand all reality through axiomatic systems. So people like David Hilbert, German mathematician, Bertrand Russell, Ludwig Wittgenstein, they're all working on this perfect axiomatic system of logic. And they wanted to beat the other one to get there. And that would mean, well, Hilbert went at the conference, he got up and he said, I'll give it to you in German. Wir müssen werden und wir werden wissen, which means we must know everything and we will know everything. In fact, he called it on the counter when he said it, like a good German. And that meant that there was such an arrogance at the time of mathematicians that math and logic would lead us to truth, and that was a total rejection of all the intuitive sciences. And but sitting in the audience was Gert Gödel. And less than a year later, he tore down that whole system, completely fell. Wittgenstein lost his mind. He came back and finally said that math is just a game, that no mathematical proposition is real, and so he kind of reacted the other way. Bertrand Russell abandoned his project. David Hilbert died, and his epitaph was that we must know everything and we will know everything. It's on his gravestone. And that's how it ended. Right on his gravestone. Who knows? Gödel and Albert Einstein at the Institute for Advanced Study, they were BFFs. They hit it off. Einstein said that Gödel was the most fantastic mind he'd ever encountered in his life. And they had these long walks, where they discussed different things, and Gödel would review Einstein's work, and they talked together. I wish I could have been a pro or something just to listen to some of those conversations. This is a drawing when I went to the library and decided to change over to Alchemy. I discovered, and it's one of the most important ones, I thought, that really made a difference in changing me. It's from Daniel Maliv's medical chemical book, and painted by Marion. This is a copy that I restored in color just to make it easier to follow here. But it summarizes all the Hermetic philosophy and also summarizes a lot of Gödel's work. We see here a real division between the above and below. That's the first thing we notice. This is the area above of energy, archetypes. We see these archetypes and the three principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt expresses Father, Son, and Holy Ghost here, to get by the Christian censors, I think. And the below, which again is divided on this horizontal axis between left and right. This is the duality. There's no duality above here, but below it's divided into that masculine, aggressive side and the feminine, passive side, light and dark, if you will. And this is the struggle that we need to heal on a conscious level in order to become alchemists, to become this central figure here, who is the androgynous alchemist, uniting the black and white and the dark and the light within himself, standing on the vitriolic lines, which are now have one head. The feminine way, tied to nature, tied to the cosmos, tied to the powers of nature, the lunar powers, and growth, and healing, and nurturing, and the elements here are water and earth, and the masculine energy tied to the creative world, construction and building things, and controlling nature, with the lying assisting him, that type of energy. The elements here are fire and air, and you see both these sides are chained to the cloud, what they call the clouds of unknowing, chained to that and unable to perceive that upper reality that determines our reality of the one mind. So you can't as a female consciousness determine or enter this area, and you can't as a male consciousness. It has to come together as a female-male consciousness, or what the Egyptians called intelligence of the heart, or that balance which Jung would call intuition, the balance between intellect and feeling, sensation. It's a process that is at the core of all Hermetic teachings. Now, the alchemist here is able to enter into this realm above and understand it. And the first thing, there's no clouds here, the first thing he encounters are the canopy of the stars, which are the higher principles or entering into the spiritual realm. And these are birds of alchemy that symbolize the different operations in alchemy that have to be done. The crow of calcination, the goose of dissolution, and the cock of conjunction, the pelican of distillation, and the phoenix of coagulation, the 5 primary operations and the 5 primary planets of alchemy, from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, and this Mercury. And this is the stone, this is actually, we have the horizontal and vertical axis, but this axis actually is projecting out this way. So we have a third axis in this drawing, which is also another thing to look for in alchemical drawings. That third axis, which is like a mandala. It's a principle in the mandala. And it's where you focus your attention in meditation to try to bring all these together in one vision, one unitary vision that conveys wisdom. It's hard to try to think about these many individual principles and not see them as one cohesive whole, and that's when it becomes a real tool. So there's different layers here, 7 layers of meditation, and we're definitely talking about meditation on this level, where you need to peel away like the skin of an onion to reach the inner essence of consciousness, which is here portrayed as monad, which we'll talk about later too, which is the stone in alchemy. Now the most important thing here, most people miss when they study this drawing, and that is that there are 2 suns here. There's a sun behind the sun, or sometimes called the black sun or the hidden sun. That is the one mind in alchemy. That is the unknowable presence behind our universe, outside our universe, that created it, or at least understands it. And this is called, like in alchemy and Hermetics, mind maker. So it's like the one mind projected information into the Big Bang through light, and what took it over and made it real was mind the maker, which is nature. And so it's almost like a matrix going on in our universe, unfolding the mission of the one mind. It's almost like it's archetypal, and that's why the archetypes unfold. So we know nothing about what the meaning of the mission was. I mean, was it probably to perfect matter, spiritized matter. But we don't know that because we know nothing about the one mind. But we can know this part. We can know nature. We can contact these, merge with these archetypes and understand the principles here of this matrix behind our reality.
How is the one mind and the one thing different?
The one mind is energy. You look at it that way. The one mind is information in energy, and it has the characteristics of a mind. The one thing has the characteristics of a body or matter. So the one thing here is the created world, and it's actually the one thing manifests as material things, but it originated as what's called the first matter. And the first matter was something on the borderline between matter and energy. It's that instant. We know that matter and energy are equivalent and change back and forth into each other. And that's the instant when they're changing, when they're completely balanced. So if you get a hold of a hunk of first matter, it can become anything through your conscious projecting on it. And in alchemy, your souls, your own souls, are the first matter of your being. So that's why we work to get in touch with that. The first matter is the key to alchemy. There's no doubt. Key to the work. I mean, the philosophy is here, but the key to the actual work is getting the first matter, getting in contact with your own soul or whatever you're talking about.
What is that? What are the birds again?
The birds are the operations of alchemy. So we have the crow, which is the bird of calcination, the first operation. It's associated with Saturn, so it's getting rid of that lead in the operation. It's trying to progress from lead to the next level, and
it's the dark but necessary stage, the Negretto. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's the beginning of the Negretto of the black phase.
And the space between the two suns, the second one is sort of a new thing for me. So I've always seen the space between the knowable, like on the other side of the veil, and the unknowable, which is outside of that circle.
The unknowable.
And so, what is that? What do they talk about? That second, the space between that sun that's unknowable and
this space.
That space, yeah. What is that relationship?
It's inaccessible. It's that. In other words, we have our universe where we can function, where we can actually know things, and we have what's outside our universe, totally outside our universe, that determines it. And that, whatever it was, whatever it is, we have no way of knowing what it is. And that is what projected our whole universe into being with the Big Bang, or in the alchemical prints too. It's the same thing. We see the idea that there's this sun behind the sun, the dark sun, that is projecting into, this is the first matter, the cauldron of matter, some type of change, the alpha and omega, everything through fiat lux, created by light. And that's what's determining our and this is an ancient philosophy from Egypt that's being confirmed every day in science.
So I get to add another whole layer of unknowable.
Don't think of that separation too literally, because there's no space.
Right, there's no space.
In fact, Gödel proved that in what was called the, Theorem 3, I call it. But anyway, he proved that mind is not isolated in our mind, in our brains, that mind is everywhere. And that it's not a static thing. And that the one mind is connected to that, but not through any immediate means.
Nothing we can access.
Nothing we can access. No powers of it. But this pattern is in us too. This pattern is repeated in everything. So there's a one mind in us that we can access because it's within us. And that's what meditation's about. You access that one mind, you project into the matrix, the nature, the biology of your own body, and you can change it. And that's what the alchemists believe. So this pattern, now that's different. The pattern's in all of us. But the mind, one mind is everywhere. And it's not isolated. And these are all drawings of this moment of creation, the Big Bang, into the duality of light and darkness. And you see hundreds of these drawings in alchemical works. And basically it's describing this process, which is the Big Bang, which took place 14 billion years ago from a singularity, what we call a singularity, where something burst, where light burst into emptiness, nothing, and had this information that keeps spreading. Our universe keeps expanding with the same information. In other words, nothing has changed from the Big Bang. Not a thing, despite all the things that we've gone through and all the different layers of the universe. The picture that was projected is exactly the same for every stage. It's called the egalitarian principle, and it means that any part of the universe is the same as the original. The spacing, the energy, the total components of that area of space are true to the original image of what it was supposed to be. And it also means that there's a connection between light, because light is carrying this information into matter. It's a universal equation, E equals mc squared. Energy and matter are equivalent and come back and forth, change into each other through the media area of light. In fact, if that equation, if the little c in that equation stood for consciousness instead of the speed of light, then that would be an alchemical equation. You know, the alchemists would have no problem with that. And this burst into reality, there's another amazing thing about it. It always adds up to zero. There's nothing here, mathematically, in physics. Because the singularity, if you weigh the universe, and they have, mathematically, it weighs the total mass energy, and that means energy and mass converted into each other. It weighs 10 to the 53rd power, which is a huge, huge number. That's the weight of everything that's been created in the universe. And they recently, with just the last couple of years, they've determined the weight, if you will, of gravity, the force of gravity. And with no connection between the equations, they determined that the weight or the influence of gravity is 10 to the minus 53rd power. They completely cancel each other out. In other words, there's nothing there. The bottom line is that the universe sums up to zero. I mean, what a perfect way to create something out of nothing. You know, it's amazing. And there's other things here.
And nothing out of something.
Nothing. It just adds up to nothing. There's and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's another thing here that adds up to zero, which is amazing. There's different stages here. When light came from the singularity, it changed into, after about 60,000 years, it started changing into matter. And what occurred was what they call the neutrino phase. And the neutrinos are kind of something between light and matter. They're almost impossible to detect. I mean, right now there's billions and billions of neutrinos going through this room, passing through all of us. And there's a lot of work recently to detect them by building detectors, you know, thousands of feet underground. Hopefully they'll catch one, but they figure it might be 1,000 years before they catch one because they're that rare. But when neutrinos were created, that's when the duality occurred. So from the light came a duality, and there were antimatter neutrinos and there were matter neutrinos. And that's where the duality of our existence came from, right here on this expansion of the universe. So you had this duality, and it would have summed up to nothing eventually. It would have come back together from nothing, except for one totally unexplainable fact in physics and astronomy. For some reason, there was one extra neutrino for every 100 billion particles at the beginning. It wasn't a perfect balance. And they call the neutrino the God particle because it seems an act of intent, and a totally unexplainable act, that there was one tiny extra neutrino for every 100 billion particles, and when the bang, when antimatter and matter combined, it was the most unbelievable explosion in the universe. But what was left over was what became us. We are that. If that extra neutrino hadn't been there, the universe would have destroyed at this point, and it wouldn't have expanded. So there's intent there, and again, the universe would have added up to zero at that point. So the first matter is the key, and we'll focus on that for a while. The first matter is often depicted as a dragon because it's uncontrollable, and there's a lot of fear associated with dealing with the first matter, especially on a personal basis from the unconscious. Our unconscious is like this dragon where we put a lot of energies and stored secrets and things that we don't want people to know, things that we don't want ourselves to know. So it's I love this quote. I am a poisonous dragon, present everywhere, to be had for nothing. I am both male and female, and carry the powers of both heaven and earth. I am the egg of nature. I spring from the earth and descend from heaven. I am the carbuncle of the sun. Yet I am most noble when purified and produce a substance by which you may perfect anything. And that sums it up pretty good. Huh?
What is a carbuncle?
Carbuncle is like a pimple. It's like the defect on the sun.
Okay.
It's a big pimple. This is the first matter. Again, another depiction of the first matter. It's always associated with darkness. But there's always, the archetypes are hidden in the first matter too. And that's where the energy is that the alchemist wants to connect with. And that's what we want to connect with in meditation too. Because the archetypes and all the stuff you're doing with the gods and the mask and all that work, you're connecting with the archetypes, the archetypal energies, which are facets of the first matter that are in creation. The archetypes you can work with because different archetypes are associated with different energies. You know, the energies, fear or fire or transformation. They're all different archetypes that we can access. And Campbell and Jung knew about that, and they wrote about it.
And these are astrological over here, it looks like.
Yeah, these are astrological archetypes which are shown. They come down into each of us, and they determine our personality to a large extent. So the first step really is to get in touch with our own personal archetype and transform it, because a lot of times these aren't good things. I mean, these are how we're salted in a lot of ways. You know, a lot of our negative characteristics are determined by the planets and the stars, and that's something we have to overcome. It's kind of like karma, the idea of karma, and that's how they approached it.
So when you meditate, this is where you're trying to go to?
In some meditations, yeah.
And then what happens when you reach that state?
Usually these are expressed in images, or like in dreaming. The dreams you had last night, if you think about what type of image was shown up, it's easy to connect it with an archetype usually, but through the type of tools and myth that the archetype used or the god used, through the behavior of the archetype. Like Saturn is the archetype of lethargy and stubbornness and unwanting to change, and Jupiter is the expansive archetype of sociability and phoniness in the public. Also sexual abuse, you know, and Mars, of course, is the anger and war archetype. So it's easy if you know your myths and you know what you feel behind the mask. I wouldn't say easy, but it takes some work, and that's what the alchemists do. Now, alchemists uniformly believe that the first matter is not only something metaphysical, but it's also something real. And all the experiments in alchemy, most of them are aimed at isolating the first matter and trying to get it out of a plant to make the vegetable stone, or different of the mineral stone. That's what is the essence of all the stones, including the philosopher's stone. When I was in Vienna, I took my apprenticeship with Miros Favilla, an Italian living in Prague, and we actually went out on journeys to collect the first matter. He took me, the first year I was there, he took me to the Black Forest in Germany, southern Germany. And the Black Forest is known for its first matter, the black soil. In fact, the word alchemy means from the black earth of Egypt, from the Delta. So alchemists in the school I was taught in believed that the black dirt, the rich black dirt contained the first matter, and it could be isolated. So, but I was new to that, and I thought that was a crazy idea, traipsing around through the black forest with all these gunny sacks and shovel, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here, following this madman? but sure enough, he pointed to a kind of a depression in the ground, and he said, dig here. And I started digging. I got a gunny sack, started digging through the dirt, and it was crusty on top, but as soon as I got the top layer off, it was really strong smelling. I started choking, and I never smelled dirt so strong. And the dirt got loose then, and I started digging with my hands and just putting it into the gunny sack, and all of a sudden I felt a root or something wrap around my hand. I felt it move, like something moved on me. So I pull my hand out, and I throw back, and there's a snake wrapping around through my fingers. And I yell out, "Maris!" And he'd come up behind me. He says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "There's a snake." And he says, "It's a worm." He said, "It's a worm." And it is. It was a worm. There's a giant earthworm that grows in that black soil. It's called the Reagan worm. And it only grows in the Black Forest. It's like 18 to 20 inches long.
Oh, gosh.
And it's amazing. The soil, I mean, this indicates there's something special about that soil. And the castings from this worm sell for like $100 a pound because they're really rich and like roses. People who grow roses just...
Do you think there's any connection between that being like an asexual thing and...
That's a good point, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
the hermaphrodite.
And it's united in the soil. That's a good point. I never thought about that because the worm is asexual.
Oh, interesting.
Things grow in the Black Forest so dense, and that's why they call it the Black Forest, because you can't hardly see because the trees grow so close together. It's an amazing place. And so anyway, we ended up with 5 sacks of black dirt, no worms, and took it back. We ended up, he added some really nasty stuff to it to get it rotting and then fermenting, and went on for about 6 or 7 months. We distilled it and then coagulated out of that about just a test tube of something he called gur, which was a clear, thick liquid, and he would never give me any of that. But I've made my own gur since, and it's the essence of dirt. It's the essence, the first matter. In alchemy, we consider that the first matter of dirt, and we add that to like the tinctures and different preparations, elixirs, as an ingredient. So the first matter is an ingredient in alchemy. Alchemists are obsessed with the first matter, and we look for it in dew. We look for it in any kind of secretion, because the secretions are like distilling things. So you want to get it when it's already distilled. So dew is a good thing to connect it from. They use rain too, and different, like the sweat of metals. If you put a metal in sweats, that's really special stuff. You want to save the sweat from metals, not aluminum cans.
What do you mean the sweat, like when it heats up and the
It
water
heats
comes
up.
out?
There's usually an iridescent oil that'll come out when the metal sweats. It's where the spreading of the peacock's tail comes from. That the peacock is now releasing its essence, and that iridescent oil that forms on a metal. You have to do it in an enclosed furnace, a reverberatory furnace, and you get them to sweat quite a bit. The sweat of lead, is used for stuff, and the sweat of there's no sweat from gold. It doesn't sweat.
One of the symbols that we use at the alchemical fire circle is that what we call the furnace, where the drummers are. That's the reverberatory furnace that makes our metal sweat, so we show our colors.
Exactly. That's
So we're using the same metaphors here, just as we're the material, we're the prima materia.
Absolutely. In a laboratory, when you're running the reverberatory furnace, it goes boom, 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 just like you, John. This is McBride, who's famous alchemist, Dutch alchemist, and he collected the first matter from the urine of young boys. He had them go up to his washroom and piss in his bathtub, and he collected like hundreds of gallons of fresh urine from boys, and he distilled it. I mean, he'd be on some kind of list today, that's for sure. And he distilled it, and the final product glowed just like the first matter was said to have glowed when you isolate it. It gave off light, and he actually accumulated it for a long time in Europe. The first matter was thought to be contained in the urine of young boys, and everybody started drinking the urine of young boys. It was actually sold, and that's where this whole therapy of urine therapy started. was with this man because everybody believed he had found the first matter and that it would cure everything. Actually, what he'd done is isolate the phosphorus in urine, and phosphorus glows with this color. So he discovered phosphorus matter and that it would cure everything. Actually, what he'd done is isolate the phosphorus in urine, and phosphorus glows with this color. So he discovered phosphorus, but he was looking for the first matter. And I don't know how much the connection between discoveries in chemistry are. We know that sometimes what you expect occurs in an experiment, especially in atomic physics. And I think it was an amazing synchronicity.
This phosphorus you're talking about, I have been at the ocean before. Does the Earth make it? Because I have been in the ocean where I have seen waves come in and it would glow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cloudy night, there's no light whatsoever, but these waves coming in, it would actually glow. So the Earth would make it?
Yeah.
No, it's living plants and water. It's called bioluminescent plankton. They're microscopic little organisms. And when you touch them and jostle them, they're like let off I don't know if it's phosphorus, but it's similar to microscopic fireflies.
Oh, okay.
And so the wave curls over, it causes an agitation, and that causes them to light themselves up.
Okay.
But seawater is another source of first matter. If you distill it, you get some salts that are really important. So, what we're talking about, what is common to both science and alchemy and hermetic sciences, is the idea that there is two realities. That there is a higher reality or a spiritual reality or an energetic reality that determines our reality. And it's outside our ways of testing and understanding. But in meditation, you can get there. And there are archetypes here, there are structures, there are all kinds of things that are bizarre and understandable because they're all based on energy. And energy is constantly changing and reforming. In science, we actually have discovered where this boundary is. We know where the above and the below are at. And we know that this area over here is pure energy, and this first matter, and can be determined to what you observe here, or what your consciousness is projected here, occurs in the real world, or in the material world. And this boundary is in space and time, it's located at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, or 10 to the minus 43 seconds. So if you go smaller than 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, or into a time space less than 10 to the minus 43, you are there. You are in that area. And a lot of atomic experiments take place here. And that's where a lot of groundbreaking research is taking place now. It's called the Planck theory, or the Planck level of existence, after Max Planck, who was a very spiritual guy who was very interested in alchemy. He took a lot of principles. He changed us. He discovered quantum physics and connected the idea that mind influences matter, and that's the barrier. He discovered that, and it's a real place. That's the important thing to understand. Yeah.
So I've seen and read studies about quantum physics experiments, and like you were saying before, based on what they think or expect, like the particles will change. Basically. Is that happening in that space or on the other side?
No, that's happening in that space. That's the observer effect, and where what you expect is what turns out. This is called the quantum foam. So it contains all possibilities, and it's not determined until consciousness affects it in some way, or the experiment affects it in some way. And there's also another principle here, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where shows that we cannot totally know this area because we cannot observe more than one thing at once, and we cannot measure both the speed and mass in different aspects of particles. So Heisenberg proved proved on the physical level what Gödel proved in mathematics, that our knowledge cannot extend into this area, that it's not knowable. But consciousness here is a force that changes this area.
Is that what they call the veil?
Yeah, the veil in the mystical traditions, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how to get there in meditation.
I meditate a lot, and I have experienced a lot of strange things, especially since I've been doing it constantly for over many years now. And I've had an experience where I'm physically here, but somewhere else too. I'm in two different places at once. Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, it's projecting your consciousness. Your body doesn't go in this area, but consciousness does for some reason.
Yeah.
Or light. No, we're actually talking about
Okay,
light.
now the light you're talking about, pure white light.
The purest light is the white light, yeah.
Okay, I've been there.
Yeah, I believe you have. A lot of people have. And there's ways of getting there deliberately too.
Now, is the veil getting thinner as time's going on?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know how to really answer it except to say that by us knowing about the veil, knowing where it's at, it is getting thin.
Yeah.
Because knowledge unveils the veil.
Yeah.
And this is, so it's all about light. Lots of pictures about the light from the one mind coming down into our reality. For that. But I wanted to explain something about light that a lot of people miss. The light of mind is the same thing as the light we're talking about in the real world. And light carries information, and that's hard for people to grasp. Bundled up in light in physics is tons and tons of information. A lot of it we don't know what it means. But light, we know that light is actually a fuller spectrum. It goes from infrared to ultraviolet. And so our cell phones work on light, information's changed, your text messages are coming to you by light, our TVs are coming to us by light. Light carries information, that's the characteristic of light. The problem with light is that it's mercury in alchemy. And mercury is the great rebus, the two-headed thing, the two faces that shows a different face every time you look at it. And in physics that's true too. Light has this unusual ability to be both matter and energy, to appear as a wave, which is energy, or a particle. Like Descartes was the first one to perform experiments to prove that light was wave-like or energetic, and Newton was the first one to prove in his experiments that light was corpuscular, his corpuscular theory of light, that it was particles. But in truth, and Newton knew this, light is both of those things, and it wasn't until Einstein proved it that he proved that light consists of changes. It can present itself as energy or waves and present itself as particles or matter. It's the one thing that bridges energy and matter, spirit and material things. And that the light of our mind has those same characteristics is very important. Newton was such a genius. He knew in his writings and in his study in alchemy, it's a very clear principle in alchemy, that light consisted of both waves and particles. But he was afraid to publish it because of the ridicule he would have received for such an outlandish idea. But lots of comments in his writings, like the changing of bodies into light and light into bodies, is very comfortable to the course of nature, which seems delighted in such transformation. And he knew it. He knew that light sometimes appears as waves and particles, yet afraid to, and he knew it from his alchemical work. So the basic principle of discovering the first matter and discovering the essence of anything is solve et coagula. It's a short phrase from solve te corpora et coagulate spiritus. In other words, it says dissolve the body, dissolve the matter, and coagulate the spiritus, the spirit or the energy that's there. Once you have the energy, you can convert it back into matter. So there's this process of extracting the essence, the light, from something by destroying it, or the natural process of destroying things releases essences. The aging of all of us destroys us in many ways through our failures and just growth. And what's left is our essence. Whatever's left over is as bad as and uncomfortable as it is. There's something hidden in there that's very good for us to work with. And the idea is to dissolve it, to destroy it as completely as possible. Bring it up into what's left is just the essence, the tiniest little spark, and then to bring that back and create what you want through it consciously. And so you always end up in alchemy here in the real world. You don't stay in heaven. You don't stay at the Planck level. you come back, like in Buddhism. You always come back to the earth where you do the work to further transform and further spiritize matter. This is the symbol we were talking about at the center of the stone. This is the monad, the hieroglyphic monad. I won't go into a lot, but John Dee, who's a mathematician and a magician, perfect guy, one of my heroes. And this symbol, which in the Middle Ages a lot of alchemists had tattooed on their bodies because they believed that if you drop this symbol, this cipher, into a vat of first matter, it would become the world as it is today. And they had it tattooed on them. They had it tattooed on themselves. The idea is when it burned up, that you will still be there, that there's still a possibility of coming back. And so, the symbol itself, he was an expert in Euclidean geometry. He's responsible for you taking geometry in high school, because Euclidean geometry wasn't known until he brought it back to Europe. And he used it, which is really sacred geometry. Euclidean geometry is very different from other geometries. Recently, we discovered, scientists have discovered that the basic geometry of the universe is not Riemann geometry or not any of these curves, unusual topologies. It's Euclidean geometry. That when the universe is looked at as a whole, Euclidean geometry is the one that applies throughout time and space, which is really an unexpected conclusion. So Euclidean geometry is also the basis of sacred geometry, and the pyramids and the cathedrals. And he used Euclidean geometry to create this perfect symbol, which is a combination of all the planets. Here's the sun, of course, and Venus is this circle with the plus, and Mars comes down with the pointed arrow at the end. The duplicity of Jupiter and Saturn, or lead and tin, are shown here. Here's a symbol for lead, and on this side, but it's also in a mirror image seen here on this side. And the same thing's true of the symbol for tin, which is here, the symbol for tin, and then in the mirror image here, it's on this side, so it goes in. Now, the arrangement of these elements and symbols is very significant, and unfortunately, you can't read John Dee and understand it because he's such a mathematical thing. But it's a great symbol to meditate on, as are all the alchemical drawings. They're all meant for meditation. And the operations of alchemy are usually concealed in alchemical drawings. Here they are as steps to the stone of the philosophers. They're scrambled steps. This one, Basil Valentine, actually showed the steps in the correct order. And you're probably all familiar with this Azov drawing, because I know Jeff uses it in his teachings. But it's basically the operations of alchemy that you go through to transform the first matter into gold, change lead into gold, or create the stone. And it starts with the calcination phase. Calx is the white skull, is a symbol of that calcination phase. The symbol here, the first step, it's even numbered for you, it's lead. And the second step, tin or dissolution, picking apart from the solution what's good and what's saving. Mars is the separation operation, pulling apart the pieces, like in the lab would be filtration or fractional distillation, things like that on the matter. And then there's this turning point called the conjunction, whereas the things that we're saving here, are brought together on a new level. And the opposites within them combine to create something entirely new called the child of the philosophers. And conjunction's a really important stage where things come together. And it's a fragile child at first, so it has to go through the operations which are above, the operation of fermentation, which is bringing new life into it. You can think of grapes as being a good example of how grapes are formed through these stages, being crushed and destroyed, and then allowed to sit and ferment, and new bacteria, new life is introduced to create the spirit of grapes, which is wine, of the essence of grapes. And that continues to distillation, usually shown by a unicorn, which is distillation is a really purification. It creates the purest possible solution from no matter how brackish anything was. Distillation in our lives is really where we reflect, where we distill our experiences and try to learn something from them, if you will. And the coagulation phase here is the rebirth of the child philosophers in an empowered state. The stone of the philosopher is usually shown as an androgynous youth, an androgynous being born. Here's the face of the alchemist. Some alchemists, like Jeff here, has a mirror here. A lot of alchemists did that in meditation. They use it to stare in this mirror like a mandala, trying to bring in all these symbols. And the triangle here is the sign for water, also divine grace coming down. The face of God, or the divine mind, hidden here as it is hidden in us. And the secret message around the outside of the perimeter here, Visita interior terra rectificando inuis occultum lapidum, which means visit the interior of the earth, visit the interior of your own body, and rectify, and correct what you find there, and you will discover the hidden stone. And it's not expected. You know, it's going to be an unexpected event. It may seem linear here, but when the stone appears, it's always a wondrous event. Again, another principle of alchemy is consciousness is force in nature. And alchemists used consciousness in their experiments. They meditated, ora et labora. They always had a section of their laboratory set up where they could meditate, a sanctum, a tabernacle often, where they could meditate as part of the experiment.
On the previous slide, I think the bottom part of the bigger triangles is that corpus, and then the upper right is spiritus. What is the one to the far left?
Anima.
Anima.
Which is a symbol of soul. Corpus is body, of course, with the 5 stars of the quintessence here. The body contains the quintessence. Interesting here, this is the symbol for, this is the word anima for soul and spiritus, and yet they're in opposite areas. I mean, you think that soul would be associated with moon and spirit with the sun. And it's a way of saying, and Carl Jung actually talked about this, and he gave it an impossible word. He called it in andrometria. And it means the changing of one thing into another, into its opposite. And that's what's going on here. The process of soul and spirit, mercury and sulfur, they change into each other. So it's really hard sometimes in an alchemical text to say that spirit or sulfur is solar. Sometimes it's lunar because it's changing back into the other. They keep changing into each other. And, you know, even in the laboratory, mercury and sulfur have a unique relationship. And soul too is part of this. It's changing. So they have a basic 3 here: salt, sulfur, and mercury. Again, the alchemical laboratory always had a place for meditation. It had a practical side and a spiritual side, just like us. We have to live in both worlds. But there is always this unified doorway that is open to us at the center of things, always, where balance can occur and the further work takes place. So this is the entrance to the plant level of reality. This is the left entrance to the other side, and it's access to the laboratory. And the laboratory is inside all of us as well as in the real world. Wolfgang Pauli was another mathematician, alchemist from the University of Vienna. He's the discoverer of neutrinos, and he had a lot of alchemical thoughts about the nature of neutrinos. And he was a marvelous man. He had no ego. He gave away hundreds and hundreds of theories that could have gotten Nobel Prizes. He'd send them off in letters to his friends, and he didn't care about fame. He didn't care about salary. He didn't care about any of those things. He just cared about the truth. And he had a huge alchemical library. When he read Gödel's proof, he had the typical mathematician's crisis. And he went to Carl Jung in Switzerland because he knew Jung understood alchemical symbols, and they worked together. There's 400 of Wolfgang Pauli's dreams in Jung's big book, Alchemical Psychology, and he analyzed them. That was part of his therapy with Pauli, and they actually worked together on a book about psychoid events, or where consciousness affects reality, and collaboration that was really, really great. And he pushed for this idea in physics that consciousness is what we're seeing. Our own consciousness is being reflected back to us in our experiments, and he was a great force for that. So we're back to our original drawing, and which carries with it, I think, wisdom. Wisdom's the idea here. Just the idea, just the possibility of wisdom in our lives and our world is the only thing that gives us hope for a possibility for change. If there wasn't the possibility of wisdom, there'd be no point to our existence. So, and alchemists knew this. They called themselves philosophers of nature. And they were true philosophers in the sense of the word, in the Latin sense of the word philosophia, lovers of wisdom. Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. So they weren't after truth necessarily, and I found this out. It's not truth with a capital T. It's wisdom, which can be dirty and hard-won, and it's not neat like mathematics. And wisdom comes from bottom up. It just appears. We just accumulate it in life, and Rembrandt knew this, obviously into alchemy too. But one of the most important symbols here. Here we see a basket, which is the center of this drawing, which looks kind of like a Tai Chi drawing.
Is there any correlation between the wisdom of the Asian, the Taoists, stuff like that, and there's this yin and yang, the good light and the dark, and that all of that
it's
is
the same thing.
Consistent with the teachings from that.
Same thing. The Tai Chi is right here, and Taoist alchemy focused on the body. That's probably the biggest difference. Whereas Western alchemy tended to focus on metals in the lab, but it was the same teachings, and there's, I think, a lot of evidence that came from Alexandria, went both ways, and Chinese alchemy too. I think it had one
from
source.
the ancient Egyptian, from that Mesopotamia.
Absolutely, from Egypt, I think. And there's a lot of papyrus and things where you get the exact same phrases in different countries. The Taoist canon, a lot of phrases that match the Emerald Tablet, pieces of the Emerald Tablet occur around the world. So I think it originated there. And in all these traditions, there is a process. This is actually, can't see it very good here, but it's a basket that's hanging on the wall. And the bottom of the basket is here. So the basket's kind of facing us. So that's another third axis in this drawing, like we were talking about. It's projecting out towards us. So this basket is to collect what? It's to collect the wisdom. And that's part of the process. That's the central part of the process. All the changes going around it, light into darkness and change, it all accumulates here.
What's above the basket?
This basket is very important. It's telling you that you can do alchemical processes on yourself. Any alchemist looking at this drawing, and if you asked him what process is shown here, he would say distillation. And in particular, a process called sublimation, which is really a beautiful process. You have this brackish, whatever it is, poisonous stuff boiling away, and it sublimates. Sometimes you can just put a solid object and heat it, and it'll sublimate. In other words, towards the top of the vessel, there will be this spiraling smoke that goes up, and then on the side of the vessel at the very top is a powder that accumulates. And that powder is like the absolute most pure thing there is. If you do it with sulfur, it's called sulfur orientum, or the gold of sulfur. You often call it the gold of whatever you're distilling. So sublimation creates something solid, something real, a new body that's perfected through the distillation process. And so always there's a sublimation vessel, and that's what this basket represents. So to simplify it, there's a process of distillation that can go on, And you, as long as this process, and sometimes distillation go on for months, you can accumulate something in your bodies, in Taoist alchemy, in the lab. You can accumulate something that's perfect, you know. And it means that there's a possibility in us of creating a new body. A golden body is a second body, a new vehicle. Paracelsus called it the astral body or the star body. That's something real. That is something that can be done through meditation, through meditative distillation. And there's always a question about that. And I want to clarify that alchemical distillation alchemical meditation is very different from meditations that you're used to. And I discovered that the hard way. I'll tell us. I was really into meditation when I got into alchemy. I wanted to discover what they were doing because meditation is such an important thing in alchemy. So I went all over the world trying to study different kinds of meditation, you know, Zen and Zazen and Taoist meditation. And I even built an isolation tank in my garage, took up half my garage and filled it with 800 pounds of magnesium sulfate and floated around in the tank and tried to deepen the experience. And mostly, it was very relaxing, but mostly I fell asleep. And I took psychoactive drugs and once to learn the experience and moved on. And I did have some profound experience, especially with the light and how it moved about, but it wasn't really giving me a process, you know. So I got into transcendental meditation, and it was really popular back then. Everybody was doing it. And I want to say that transcendental meditation has helped millions of people. It just didn't work on me. And but I was going to give it a final test. And transcendental meditation is about stopping your thoughts, however you do it. You say something in your mind over and over again. The whole idea is focused on stopping thoughts, and as soon as you stop the thoughts, then all of a sudden you enter nirvana in this wonderful place. It just never worked for me. And I decided one day when nobody was home, it was a Saturday, I got up early and I decided I'm going to sit there all freaking day until this happens. I'm going to do the transcendental meditation and until, you know, like Buddha sitting under the tree, I was going to have it happen. So I did. I got up early in the morning, started meditating, and worked on it. I didn't move from that spot, and did the breathing, and I got in this like catatonic state after about 5 or 6 hours. And it was where I couldn't move my arm, you know, I couldn't couldn't open my eyes. And I thought, this is great. You know, it's the first time I got in that state where I was so disconnected from the body. I couldn't hear anything. My hearing was one of the first things to go. And I was really deep in meditation. But I still could think, right? But it was not thinking with a complete thought. It was like thinking with what was before the thought. You know, I just had the feeling of the thought. And that, I discovered, would not interrupt the meditation. I still was working with knowledge in a weird way, but I never had an actual thought like I was speaking in my head. It was great, and then went on for another hour and a half or so, maybe 2 hours, and I still couldn't move my body, and I was kind of playing with that. Nothing spectacular occurred, so I decided I'd get out of this, and I'd start to, but I couldn't. You know, I couldn't move. And then I got panicked. And then I was having thoughts. And I'm trying to open my eyes, I'm trying to shake myself. And then I realized that the basis of all meditation teachings is about the breath, control of the breath. Because just for such circumstances as that, because you can always control the breath. I mean, it's the only thing we can really control. And you can enter meditation through breath, and you can leave meditation through breath. So I started doing, my breath was like very, very slow. So I deliberately and consciously increased my breath and got it going. Started trying to do the fire breath, like that to get me going. It was working, it was getting my circulation going. And finally I was able to open my eyes and pop them open. But just before that, I started hearing my breath outside myself. So I delayed opening my eyes, and I'm thinking, I'm having an out-of-body experience. Now it's going to pay off. And I'm going, and I hear coming back at me, and I could hear it very distinctly. So finally, I opened my eyes very slowly, and there's my old English sheepdog sitting on his haunches, looking me right in the face, and he's going. And I looked in his big brown eyes, and I realized he wasn't having any thoughts. He was where I was trying to get to. And he was already there. And it just shocked me out of that type of meditation. So I just really disappointed meditation. I didn't want to be a dog or have a dog's mind.
So he was probably assisting bringing you back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he brought me back, but I didn't want to be back. Yeah, that's a true story. But so I went into.
Were you sitting or you were lying?
No, I was sitting cross-legged, and he was on his haunches. His name was Socrates. But so I went. I did some more research. I went back to Egypt for meditations, anything on meditations, and alchemical meditations. In Paracelsus, I found more meditations. And there is, alchemical meditations are active. They're not passive. Where you don't want to necessarily stop thoughts. You want to refine thoughts, and it's all about energy. So you start paying attention to energy, and at first you get a lot of images and things. But it's all unspoken and unspeakable probably. But the type of work you do is energetic, and it focuses on the energy behind thoughts. And you try to transform that energy or transmute that energy into a new level of consciousness. And that kind of work, it's like that's where that work has to be done. That what you realize in alchemical meditation is that meditation is a place. So one day you're meditating and you realize, oh my God, this is a place. This is a real place where work can be done. And in that state, you realize what it is you can do. I get so angry with a lot of New Age gurus and teachers who say that you can just get whatever, ask for something and it's yours, that there's a shortcut to meditation. But you have to be in your own space, you have to break away from your body, you have to isolate yourself, and you have to get in the alchemical laboratory where you can even start the work. And so it's not about closing your eyes and wishing for something. It's because, I know they're lying, because the things that you ask for, they say you can ask for a car, or you can lay that cute babe if you project far enough or deep enough, and you can get whatever you want, a new house, a new job, and power, and career, and fame. Those thoughts are too heavy in this place. You can't even have those thoughts in this place. They're like, they fall away. So I know they're not there. And what is in that place, the work you can do there, and the changes you can make and project, and especially in your own body, those things last forever, because time itself is too heavy for this place. It falls back. And so meditation, if I had a message, it's meditation is a place, and you can get there, and it's not that hard, and there's work to be done. There's work for all of us.
For my own discipline, there's this relationship of if the mind can become quiet enough, and awareness can still be fully awake, that then there's this possibility of hearing from over there or from inside the heart, but only when the consciousness is quiet enough.
Quiet enough or pure enough.
Or clean enough for that all to come to fruition. Mm-hmm. The techniques of the breath and the listening to a pin drop in the room over there next door, and your mind is really quiet enough, that can happen.
Yeah, but I think that's stages before you get to the pure place where the work can be done. I think
Where's
that-
this place you're talking about?
where
It's outside.
it's within us. It's a conscious state, but it's working with light. It's working with energy, and it's accessing that layer. Mind is everywhere, you know. So why can't you access it? And I think that sometimes when you hear voices in meditation, and a lot of the images you see are just kinds of energy that are coming down to you. And I don't know that they're real voices coming from God or anything like that. I think that they carry information just like light does. And that's just my personal opinion, though. And I know that...
The only thing I would conclude from my conversation is I really do know when they're not mine.
Okay.
When what's coming at me is not coming from within.
Okay. Then how do you work with the voices? I mean, what...
Sometimes they're images.
Are they giving you information?
Sometimes they're chatter. I don't have any experiences that I would have oh, this was.
Yeah, I know. But the information be coming about that. Remember, it's all about energy.
But it is that sense of this is some energy that's coming from somewhere that's not me.
Okay, that's it.
It might be you. It might be somebody sitting next door.
Yeah.
It could be on a random field of waves from somewhere. I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
What's the relationship between the one mind and mind? I've got something on my mind. Do I tap into it? Do I have a piece of it?
Well, according to Gurdel's proof, his ontological proof, it's all the same. The one mind is evenly distributed, and it's beyond all the individual minds that we carry are part of it. But you're your individual mind too. The pattern of the whole universe is reflected in you. Your thoughts and feelings are the thoughts and feelings of the whole universe. You know, thoughts and feelings are the binary software that is our existence. So that pattern is as true in you as it is in the universe. And the thing is to make the connection between your individual consciousness and that one mind, just tapping into it. And there's no way of knowing it. You don't have to know it, but you share the pattern of that one mind. And that's where real alchemy takes place. That's where the real work's at. And like, I can see it in, Newton, some of Newton's writings about the meditations that he went into. And based on his own version of the Emerald Tablet, is very clearly he connected with that pattern. And did his genius work come through on light like that? You know, he kind of hinted that it did.
We can get some more information about this book. I'm getting to my meditations where sometimes they freak me out and I'll pop right out of them. I mean, it feels as if I'm going somewhere else.
Yes.
And when I feel that, it scares me and I pop back out of it.
That's usually like some type of reflected energy. So you need to work on purifying consciousness more. So you need to start this dissipation operation where you go down into, however you visualize it, go down in the darkness. Don't be afraid of visions that are there. An example, do we have time?
Why don't we take the 5 minutes?
All right. An example of that, when I was doing these meditations, I had one particular vision. The energy took the form of, I was going above and below, just like a distillation operation. In fact, that's how I started the meditation. And I went up and into the light, and I saw crystal structures there, and I saw this Mobius rainbow river that was like creating reality on one side, and they all had different meanings. I don't think they were really there. They were symbols with information. And that's what typical above type meditations are in the light. So I decided to go down into the body, and into the darkness. And I went down into the body for the first time, because I was always, unfortunately, focused on the light. And when I went down into the body, I saw all kinds of scary stuff. You know, things that monsters and things that I knew would not hurt me, that I knew created. In fact, I couldn't even remember why I was afraid of that. You know, one was my traveling monster. I was always afraid of getting lost on the road because I travel so much, and getting lost in some city forever. And but another one, there are things that are very real in that body meditation because I'm down in matter, and one of them was I just traveled throughout my body. I went to the ear and peeked out, but there was one particular place where it was really strong, was in my thigh here, and I went down to my thigh to see what was there, what was bothering me, because you feel it's all energetic, and I went down deliberately to my thigh, and I saw this eyeball, an eyeball like peeking through a hole in something, and it was so strong, and I stayed with it as long as I could. And then in meditation, I realized exactly where that came from. We lived in South Chicago in this old tenement house, and we had in the basement a toilet area, and it was just covered by slats basically. And you went in there and you did your duty. Well, I was watching a movie when I was about 10 years old called The Eye, or Spiral Staircase, and it's about a serial killer who goes around slashing up people in really bloody black and white movie. But just before he kills someone, they show his eye peeking in and looking at him, and then he proceeds to kill him. So I knew that was where that came from, and the reason it was imprinted in me so bad, and this may be a little gross, but after the movie, I went down to the basement to the bathroom, and I was urinating. And my father, the great prankster, came down, shut off the lights, and had a flashlight, and peeked through a crack, and shown his eye. And I screamed, and I locked up, and my thighs just locked up powerfully, and I couldn't hardly move. And I sent that energy right here. I sent that eyeball, you know, and I realized that in meditation. I mean, that's a trivial example maybe, but that's the kind of work you can do. And in meditation, you can travel to the organs. The organs are vessels, alchemical vessels, and they all have their own identity and feeling and energy to them. Mm-hmm. And if you have a kidney problem, or especially the liver, visiting the liver is an amazing experience, because it's like the repository of the soul. It's not only purification energies there, but there's a lot more in the liver than you think. And you can go to different organs, and that's how you should start the meditation. Maybe I'm confusing everyone, but we should do a meditation, maybe a guided meditation tomorrow if there's time, half hour, 45 minutes, and work through this, an alchemical meditation. We'll just go through it.
I was going to ask you to do that for me.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, because I don't want to confuse everybody.
I was in a meditation, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, and I hit this state where I felt a presence. And it was kind of like I was trying to communicate with this presence, but I knew it was there. It would not communicate back with me. And then I got in a state of fear. And then I seen light and darkness. And in this, in this state, the darkness I wanted out of me, and I drew it out of me. Mm-hmm. Alright, when I got all the darkness out of me, I was back. And then as soon as I came back, I popped right out of my meditation. But when I got up, I was so drunk that I couldn't hardly stand up. I was just totally, I was like a really drunk person.
Exhausted or just?
Exhausted, I was drained of energy, just bouncing off the walls, and I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. It sounds...
I think this kind of experience is really common, and maybe you could talk more about it with Dennis during one of the breaks, but we do kind of need to move forward. So I would just like to say thank you to Dennis for sharing. After we take in, so much information.